In this video, I'll demonstrate the core functionality of TMI, or Trimble Mobile Imaging software, which is the web-based application that users use to control a Trimble MX7, MX50, or MX9 system in the field. So the first step, of course, after you've powered on the system is to actually join the local network that is produced by your MX system. In this case, I've joined the MX9 via Wi-Fi. You, of course, can also join via Ethernet. So once you've joined the appropriate network, you then navigate to the appropriate web address. It is different for each of the systems, but for an MX9, it's simply tmi.mx9.net. So once you have loaded that web page, give it a moment perhaps once you first powered up the system and gotten your 3 green status LEDs gone solid on your CU box. This is where you first land. So from this kind of map view, we can do a couple of things. We can hit this little icon here. We can turn on a background map once we've actually connected to an external Wi-Fi, such as a hotspot on your phone. We can toggle on and off prior mission coverages there. We can also load in a KML file, and I should be specific, KML file, not KMZ, for mission planning purposes. Simply click that plus sign and you can load a new one, and I've got a couple already loaded here. We can click this icon to collapse that. You'll of course also notice that you can see an instant disk capacity reading. In this case, with the MX9, both disk 1 and disk 2. See how much space you have left. That, of course, updates as you go during mission capture. Really everything else here, besides, of course, starting and stopping runs and then powering off the whole system, is contained under this hamburger menu in the upper left. So click that to expand it and work our way down. So system info just gives you a nice quick snapshot, which product, serial number, TMI version, time left on maintenance, so on and so forth. Under settings, we have a number of options here. General settings is basically language. Mission presets is pretty important. We'll get back to that in a moment. Calibration import. So once you've moved, I should say, a sensor, be it one of the lasers, both lasers, or one of the planar cameras on your MX9, you can run a calibration off your calibration run in Trimble Business Center. You then export that JSON file, put that on a thumb drive, stick that into one of the USB ports on your control box, and then you can import it here. We'll come back to a couple of these. Wi-Fi settings, you simply go here and actually kicks you to the admin interface to join that hotspot I referenced before. So again, if you would like to have the OpenStreetMap base map running in the background during mission capture, you will need to actually pair over here on the right side with a hotspot, such as your phone. I'll come back to this admin interface in a moment. Remote support, self-explanatory, you launch that per the instruction of Trimble Imaging Support if you need help in that way. And again, this system administration icon will kick us back to that other tab for some other options. But I do want to spend a little bit more time here on mission presets and sensor settings. So mission presets, we have 2 core options here. So mine weren't loading at first, but there we go. All of my saved vehicles. Let's say I want to edit this particular vehicle. Hit the pencil icon. So of course you have your installation height measured to the external reference point, always in meters. We can enable the DMI or GAMs and record those X, Y, and Z offsets, and whether it's on the left or right side of the vehicle, GAMs, X, Y, and Z. And if you do have any external accessories, perhaps a third-party super high-resolution camera, you can enable the COM port, set your triggering settings, and a couple of things. So all that is very specific to each third-party add-on you may be using, and definitely either check with that manufacturer or Trimble Imaging Support for some of the details of those settings. But once you're happy with which accessories, DMI GAMs, any external accessories, you simply save those vehicle settings. Or in this case, I don't want to save it, I'll cancel. Capture settings, same thing. Let's say I want to edit this particular one. Select it, click the pencil. Try that one again. So again, you change the name as you need to. So your sensors, you can enable or disable them right here per your capture settings. But there's also the dedicated sensor setting, so it's kind of a little bit of redundancy there. Certainly when you move a sensor before you do your calibration run, you want to roughly dial that in under the sensor settings page, which we will show momentarily. But you can also turn on and off various sensors here. So for example, if you're running the MX9 at night and none of the cameras matter whatsoever, you could just uncheck each one here. You can also play with these user accuracy thresholds. This is really important based on your project requirements, right? Great to actually improve upon these values, make them a little bit tighter tolerances if you're doing engineering applications. If you are doing simply a point cloud capture for, let's say, GIS database population, and maybe your field team is doing this over, tens or hundreds or thousands of miles, and it's all about efficiency and, rough mapping grades, sub-meter accuracy is all that matters. You can raise these thresholds so that folks don't have to do as much dynamic driving prior to actually beginning their capture. So we'll see this in a few moments, but based on the values you apply here, depends how long it will take for your IMU to kind of warm up and allow your operator to begin capture. We went down to the camera settings. As of a couple TMI versions ago, you can actually trigger these independent of each other. So the Ladybug, the panoramic camera, the two forward-facing planar cameras, and the backward-facing pavement camera can all be triggered differently and independent of each other. So you got distance from 1 meter on up, or fixed frame rate from 1 up to 10 frames per second. So you can again adjust each of those sensors, each of those cameras as you wish. You can also change your laser capture settings, pulse rate, and the line speed for your project requirements. Of course, there's trade-offs there with max range and so forth. And again, for external connectors, just like as it reminds you here, if you actually set up those other parameters in your vehicle preset, you can then set your triggering here as well for that external camera, whatever the case may be. Once you're happy with all that, you would save. And obviously, you can see you have various options stored here. You can obviously select one and delete it if it's no longer valid. And of course, hit the plus sign to add either new vehicles or new capture settings. And the last main thing to focus on this kind of core settings page is our sensor settings. As mentioned previously, let's say I just adjusted my front left camera to turn perfectly perpendicular. I could play with the sliders here, apply those values. Again, that's kind of just roughing it in really for your calibration run. Once you've done that calibration run, you would then process that in TBC, export that JSON, and then bring it in via calibration import here. So with that, we'll kick it over to system administration and talk about a few more options here in TMI. So this will take you straight back to that main TMI page where you can start capturing information. Dashboard is where we are here. It gives you kind of a quick system overview of some key values, current firmware versions, license expiration, etc. For a firmware update, as those do get released by Trimble periodically, just like everything else, whether it's your calibration import or KML file, etc., you will put those files on a thumb drive, plug them into one of the USB ports on your CU box, and if you don't see it right away, you can refresh. I actually just did this firmware update this morning, so you still see my thumb drive is plugged in. If I didn't see the file I was looking for right away, I could refresh and access it. If you do run into some issues, as happens from time to time, you can certainly download the log file and share that with Trimble Imaging support, and they can do a deeper dive and some diagnostics. I've already mentioned the Wi-Fi settings before. Again, that's how to connect to an external hotspot, let's say on your iPhone, to enable that OpenStreetMap background base map. License, again, similar to firmware updates, calibration import. We can go here. I don't have a license file on that thumb drive, but if I did, I could refresh and update that. Remote service, I've hit on briefly before as well. You would start that session per the instructions of Trimble Imaging support. And for that, you do also need to be connected to an external network. So one option there, for example, would be if you're plugged in to your MX9 system, for example, via Ethernet, you can join a different Wi-Fi network or vice versa, or just use your hotspot through this interface. And they'll give you those instructions if and when the time comes. You can export some system information and then see the license agreement. And that is truly all the options here under the admin pane. I'll jump back into the main TMI page briefly. And again, we've already talked about the map settings and disk capacity. The last thing to demo here is really just beginning a mission. So I'll hit the plus sign. I'll give it a unique name. You could write a description if you wish. And of course, from this page, you already have to have your vehicle presets and your capture settings. So If you have a new vehicle or a new setup and you haven't yet made those adjustments, you'll need to actually cancel, go add those in your settings, then come back here and they'll be available to you in this drop-down menu. Other couple of note fields if you'd like to use them in your capture settings. Then you click Next. You get this nice little reminder, are these all the settings you meant? Say yep, so I'll go ahead and start. And then once this initializes, I'll only linger on this briefly. I've got the system set up in a garage, so I won't be able to drive down my heading values to actually capture anything. But once the sensors have initialized, we'll get the nice dashboard view. We'll see those user accuracy thresholds that we mentioned a few minutes ago. And you'll see those slider bars and how, of course, it takes a while of driving around, depending on which system you're using, for the IMU to warm up and to drive those values down. And of course, the MX9 relative to, say, the 7, a lot more sensors to initialize, so this can take a few moments depending on the situation. All right, so now here's what we see once we've begun our mission. If I go to the dashboard view, you can see me in the garage. Again, OpenStreetMap, if I had connected to Wi-Fi, I'd be over here on the left. And again, you'll notice we're way outside our appropriate capture settings. These really won't drive down sitting here stationary. I gotta actually have the system mounted and begin driving. From the camera, we can say go to each one individually. We can play with the exposure compensation and either brighten or darken that. I'm just in a very dark environment here. And that's true of all the cameras. Turn on the auto exposure for the Ladybug as well. Now here's our navigation pane. Again, it's degraded currently. These values will improve really quickly with an MX9 and really all the systems once you begin driving. We can see that it's not yet ready. If we had checked on the DMI or the GAMS accessories in our vehicle presets, those would show up here with an OK or things of that nature. And of course, we'd also get a sky plot of any satellites if we're actually not indoors. Here's our little laser check, left and right, and you get some kind of real-time feedback. Of course, the GPS is not synced. We know that already from the red over here, and some other couple of values. This is great just to check yourself if you inadvertently didn't update your line speed or pulse repetition rate as you meant. Here's another kind of fail-safe check to your operator. You can add comments as you go in the mission. Maybe something funky happened on a certain corridor or certain stretch of road. You could write that in there. You can actually update your mission settings. Let me go back into that too quick. If you click this little gear icon, let's say you moved from more of an urban area to a rural area and you wanted to change your settings accordingly. You could do that without having to redo a dynamic and static session to warm up the IMU and the pause solution. So that's a really nice feature. And of course, once we're actually ready to capture, we could go right here. And of course, it's not going to let me do that because my pause is degraded. So you got to at least get down into the yellow to begin capture. But yeah, once that goes and plays, we're actually driving around in real world scenario. Then that becomes a stop button. At the end of each run, press stop. And so once we're done, we've done our final static session into the mission, into the run, I should say. We can go ahead and end the entire mission with that X in the upper right-hand corner, and then say, yep, I'm ready to complete the mission. And this will turn off each of the sensors. You probably hear the laser winding down in the background. And then once this is done, we can either begin a new mission, or we can go ahead and shut down the system for good. And shut down. This will give you a timer, 60 seconds. At the end of that, the system will have actually already shut itself down. You don't have to go push the power button. So I'll let this count us down and I'll go ahead and stop the video. But again, this was just a really brief tutorial of using TMI. There are some slight differences between particularly the MX50/9 and the MX7. Nothing major, really just less settings to play with because it's just a Ladybug camera. But yeah, the similarities are pretty substantial, so this should give you a really good idea, regardless of which MX system you're using for your operators.